What's going on, everybody? Thanks so much for joining us. We're here today with the next episode of the Build and Grow with Real Estate show. I have an awesome guest one for our Perspectives series, talking about changes in the market, what's going on here. Tonya Lucas, I want to welcome you to the show. Thanks so much for joining us today. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, Tonya, I always like to start here. I mean, first of all, we're interviewing some of the top experts in different markets throughout the state, and I had the pleasure to talk to you a couple times on the phone, and we dug into all things politics and housing and economy and everything. Let's start with, how did you get started in real estate? Like, what was it that attracted you to real estate? When did you get started? All that kind of stuff. Give us the nitty gritty.
Okay, here's the nitty gritty. So 5 years ago, in May of 2017, that's when I got my real estate license. The reason I got it was my husband and I were flipping houses.
Nice.
And I had gone to, it was our first house that we flipped, and I went to sell it for sale by owner. And the people would come and stay for like an hour and a half and ask a bunch of questions, and they just wouldn't act.
Yeah.
And to tell you the truth, like, I didn't know the next right thing to encourage them to do besides write an offer.
Right.
And I didn't know I didn't know how to write an offer. So I did sell it. We sold it on our own for sale by owner, like 9 months into it. But at that time, like during that time, at the end of that, I just got into real estate school and got my license and went from there.
Off from there. So let's jump off on that. All right. So you were flipping your first house. Mm-hmm. Okay. What were you doing before real estate?
I was a stay-at-home mom for many over 20 years. Let's put it that way.
So you became a real estate agent to kind of get a break. So you didn't have to work so hard, right?
Yeah. Right.
Well, okay. So, all right. So you decide to flip a house. Well, tell me about this first project. What was First of all, where was it?
It was unique. It was on Central Boulevard in Camp Hill. It was the first house we had ever bought. We lived there. It was our first ever home, that we had bought, and it went for foreclosure, and we bought it. And we fixed it up. We were actually going to sell it to my brother, and they kind of rented it from us for a while, and they were like nervous about buying, just because it was their first time. So they decided to buy something less. It was a townhouse, and so then we sold it. So it was a unique situation with it being the first house we ever lived in. Yeah,
that's great. That's great. Yeah. How much did you put into the rehab? Was it like a major rehab, or you just do light touch-ups, or what happened?
It was a major rehab. I think the first thing that we did in that project, we got hammers, and we tore the 1950s tile down off the bathroom. It was fun. It felt like one of the HGTV shows.
Right. And did you have? Let's talk about the mistakes you made there, because a lot of our viewers are primarily real estate investors, right? And so they've either flipped houses themselves, or they have rentals, or they're thinking about it, And so, and anytime we dig into this, like the first rehab I ever did, I thought that you had to do the work yourself if you were flipping houses, and little did I know that the properties that I touched, I would do much worse on than the ones that I didn't, So tell me a little bit about that journey. You said you lived there. Was it the plan to flip this place, or was it, hey, we're living here, I think there's some opportunity to make some money here, let's fix it up and sell it?
Okay. So I think, we didn't, that second time that we bought it wasn't the time we lived there. So we had bought it. We had lived in it for 4 years. We sold it and moved to our second home in Mechanicsburg.
Got it.
And then it came back to the market because the people, and so that's when we purchased it. So we didn't live in it.
Okay.
And it was to flip it. And I feel like we did it, and I feel like our eyes were wide open, even though this was our first one, just because my husband had been in construction in Bucks County. And so he's very meticulous. So I didn't have to worry about any of the construction. Like when the people came through and bought it, they did inspections back then, unlike now. Yeah. So there wasn't really anything that came up, because he did a great job with it. So we really didn't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
And we made a really good profit on it.
That's
So,
awesome. So,
yeah.
okay. So again, repeat this. When did you buy it? And it took, and then 7 months later you sold it, or you bought it and you finished it and it
No,
was seven
no. So
months later?
because we bought it and we renovated it, and then we rented it to my brother because he was
Yeah.
like, "Don't sell to anybody else," you know. And then because they were like, "We better buy a townhouse that's going to be more affordable and in our budget." That's when we finished, you know, touching everything up and then put it on the
Sure.
market. I can't remember those dates exactly. I know when we sold it right before I got my license. So it would
Okay.
have been like April of 2017. I got my license May of 2017. And
Okay.
at that point, it had been on the market about 9 months, I would say.
Hmm.
We put it on in the summer, but we
Okay.
had put it on at the end of the summer. So something I would have learned from that is I would have had that puppy on in the spring. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Yeah.
I would have just, you know, probably rented it out or done something and just put it on in the spring
Yeah.
because we put it on right as, you know, the end of August.
Hmm.
And that's when all the kids are going back to school.
That's exactly right.
Pauses for a month and they have holidays and, you know, all this stuff.
You know, it's funny you say that. I have some friends that they flip a lot of houses, and
Mhm.
many of them, you know, their offer price will fluctuate based on when they're buying it, knowing that the fall sales market is not nearly as strong as the spring. Some of them will even hold the place for another 4 to 6 months before they put it on the market, just to hit that spring, you know, buying market. Um, you know, that's obviously in a stable market where we don't have, you know, this huge crazy demand that we're seeing
Right.
today.
That's right.
Okay, so you got your license in 2017. Let's talk
Mhm.
about some changes that, you know, you've seen over that time. I know that
Crazy.
uh, well, so I started flipping houses, I don't know what, 2006, 2007. The first three that I bought were a mess, and you know, the worst timing ever, right? When I got back to it again, it was about 2015 or 2016, and I can remember having such anxiety when I put this thing. We finally finished it. We put it on the market, and we had showings, but it wasn't like, you know, you put a house on the market today and the first weekend, if it's not sold, it's like, forget it, you know?
Yeah. Like what's
I,
wrong with the house?
right. What would do wrong? But I remember talking to I don't know, mentor, friend, whatever, a seasoned guy who'd done this tons. And he said,
Mhm.
you know, I was like ready to drop the price after the first week. He goes, relax,
Mhm.
30 days, wait 30 days. If you don't have a lot of bites, then you go back and reevaluate it.
Mhm.
Now, though, you know, that's a totally different story. But tell me a little bit about the differences that you're seeing in the market as an agent from when you got started to, you know, kind of how the market's progressed.
Absolutely. So I would say the biggest thing that I'm seeing is for investors. I
Hmm.
work with a lot of investors because I'm an investor myself.
Yeah.
And they're such a constant source of income for me, right? Like they're kind of like your foundation. They're always buying and selling when it comes to flipping. And there's just nothing to sell them.
Yeah.
I definitely attribute it to several things. Obviously, the market and the demand being low, COVID hitting, and the banks allowing forbearance, which
Hmm.
means there are less foreclosures, less short sales, and then the wholesalers. I mean, people don't like maybe calling that out, but it's truth. Like they're part of our competition now. They're going directly to my investors, selling to them, right? And
Yep.
taking me out of the equation. Um, so I see doing a lot less business with the investors currently. I think if the market changes and the foreclosures start opening up and that changes and that, you know, that's gonna change for all of us.
Yeah.
I, you know, as investors, as agents. The other thing I'm seeing is, I mean, the only time I would say that it was similar to this current market is when so those 3 months that we were shut down for COVID, I
Yep.
was homeschooling 3 kids full time, and I was closing 30 houses in those 3 months,
Yeah.
and it was insanity when it opened back up. All of my buyers that were like on hold for those 3 months, and plus all of these other people, it was like you opened up. I was working like 80 hours a week, and it wasn't enough time.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
people went crazy. But now it's the same type of demand except worse. I mean, I'm writing offers and I know what it takes to be the offer chosen, but every single offer you're going typically 26,000 to 86,000 over asking, paying both sides of the transfer tax. I mean, it used to be you put down $1,000 earnest money for every 100,000. So if it's a $300,000 house, you put $3,000 down. Now it's like, no, 30,000 isn't enough. You need to put $50,000 down.
Yeah, yeah.
Insanity. And then when the listing agent calls me, I'm like, wait a second, like we gave a $60,000, like you retraced everything back. Like, what else did they possibly want? They're like, oh yeah, we got a cash offer, and that's our biggest competition right now. Cash offer.
Okay, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit because there's a lot there, right? So, but I think it's really interesting. So I'm on the other side of the transaction where, I get to see what people are either thinking about offering on properties, or, I get contacted by somebody that says, hey, look, I have this property under contract. What can you lend on it? When can we close on it? All that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of, what threw me off is about a month ago, the number of owner occupied people that contact me. People are trying to buy a house. Mm-hmm. They're looking for other types of financing, not because the banks won't do it, but because we can close in 48 hours and they can go in as a cash buyer on a property. Now, unfortunately, we don't do those kind of loans. We don't do consumer loans. So, I can't help in that arena, but it amazed me that we had this spike where, I'm opening my inbox and I got pages and pages of inquiries, and I'm going, well, 3/4 of these I can't do anything with. I can't help because it's people trying to compete for that spot. I think one thing that investors are really running into, in addition to the competition from retail buyers, is that a lot of those houses that have been abandoned, ignored, dilapidated over the years, well, the home prices have gotten to a point where it just makes sense to renovate them. So they've already been rehabbed, and so like the inventory of the unimproved house or the dilapidated or the, whatever, the challenge that, that causes the problem and that they can get at a discount, they just don't exist as much anymore.
I agree. I think the supply and the demand, and the cost and the inflation. So my rule of thumb when I would go in would be the same thing I taught my investors. If you purchased it for $150,000, you needed $100,000 buffer in there, sell it for $250,000, and you would still make a $40,000 to $50,000 profit. Now with the cost of construction,
oh my gosh, it's insane.
Materials, labor, and now the houses that you used to get for $100,000 or $125,000 are now $175,000.
Exactly.
And yes, they're worth more, but that $100,000 buffer, it's got to be more now because of the cost of everything.
And beyond that, I think that a lot of investors, yourself included, right? So if you started investing after 2008, or let's say after 2010, we've been in this market that every month the prices are going up, and not significantly, but it can absorb a lot of mistakes or a lot of oversight in construction or whatever, where maybe you don't lose money, or, maybe break even on that deal instead of losing money. And now with the uncertainty of what's next, like, you really have to be on point with your numbers and be a lot more pessimistic on your offer, on what your exit price is going to be.
I agree.
And I think that a lot of people, well, I'll give you a great example. I comped out a property with an investor. He thought it was worth 200. I thought 185, and it was, it was a fair exit price and all that kind of stuff. And I think they were going to make an offer around 100,000, right? And the asking price was maybe 90. Okay. So we're thinking, all right, this is going to be a pretty competitive offer. It's going to be good. We were going to provide them with a good amount of financing.
No way.
Right. It's sold for $165,000, and the exit value is not, there's no money to do improvements. And it's like, how is that possible? How are people jumping into these? And I wonder if it's a mistake or if we're missing the boat, because there's, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I agree with you. But I wrote on one a couple months ago that was 130,000, and we went way over asking. I mean, considerably. It sold for 205 or 210,000,
Wow.
and it had to be a cash offer. So I don't
Yeah.
know. And I mean, you can drive past it, you can see people are doing a bunch of renovations. The only way I can think of it will be worth it is if this person wants to live in it.
Yeah.
Because of the cost of materials, and then what it would be worth if you had to flip it.
Right.
So your numbers have got to be spot on if you're going to make. Yeah, I mean, you're looking at people are going to make less money right now. They just are in their flips.
Well, and I think that with the rental market the way it is, a lot of times people are looking at it in two ways. Look, if I can get this pie in the sky retail number, great. If I can't, I'll refinance the property and rent it out and it cash flows. And it's like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. There's other options.
I agree. It's a win-win. And I honestly think that when the market shifts and with the foreclosures, I don't think the supply and demand, like I want to clarify that because I'm very, I think there's a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm just waiting for the market to crash. I'm just waiting for it to crash. And I'm like, I don't really think that's going to happen. We're not looking at 2008 here. We're looking at a serious supply and demand issue. And the interest rates, I don't see them doing anything very much except for the fact that it's changing the number that the people can afford. So maybe they could afford 250 at 4%, and they'll only be able to afford 225 at 6%, but they still need a house.
Yeah. Well, the crazy number to me is that the median home price homes, 350 to 450 ish. What is it? Like 60% of purchases are cash. I mean, like how much of an impact can the interest rates have if you're paying cash for the place? It's crazy.
And I'll tell you what, I mean, I know you guys are bankers and you lend money, but I've seen lenders I've seen it. Like they have to up their game. Yeah. And now they're getting where some of these lenders are coming out with these cash to keys programs where it's cash. Yeah. And they're like doing some sort of assignment and you're giving your buyers a one up.
Well, and I saw something there are a couple companies that have popped out of the woodwork, just what you're talking about, where they'll pre-qualify the borrower and they go in and buy the house and then give the people time to get their mortgage. And so like even some of them actually are holding the mortgage on the sale. Yeah. So whether it's a lender or whether it's a private equity company or whatever, it's really something. It really is. It's
smart though, because whether you're a realtor or you're a lender, as the market shifts and changes, you have to do that. You have to be willing to do whatever it takes. So, if my investors were my main source of income 2 years ago, they're not anymore. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I have to be able to shift who I'm marketing to and who I'm selling to. Just like the lenders need to shift what type of loan programs they're offering.
Yeah. I mentioned this in our last show, but there's in Georgia, there are a couple companies that are offering 50-year fixed rate mortgages because at a 50-year I know it's pretty crazy, but like at a 50-year amortization, the price points or the monthly payment look like a 3 to 3.5% interest rate. So, it's a lot more feasible on a monthly payment, but man, that's a long time. And basically you're renting the house.
I know. Yeah. That is a long time, but you have to give them props for changing the way things are done because it's enabling American people to still make their dreams come possible of homeownership.
Yeah. So one of the I don't know, flies in the ointment or, the elephant in the room, I guess, is that a lot of these houses, I mean, nationwide, it's 1 in 6 houses are being bought by institutions, or, investment companies that are coming in and buying blocks. I think I saw something that JP Morgan just bought like an entire community in Florida for $45 million or something like that. That really changes the dynamic of this. And so long as they can still, so long as the stock market stays fairly stable, they're in good shape because they're using margin loans against their stock portfolio to buy these things. I'm wondering, how does that, do you see a point in the market where there is a shift, or do you think that this is just going to continue on and, maybe we get to a point where it's just not affordable to buy?
Yeah. Well, I looked at the market predictions the beginning of the year,
Mhm.
and they're saying the market's going to go up 30%. Home prices are going to go up 30% next year. I believe it just because of the supply and demand. And if you look back at last year and 2020, they did that.
Yeah.
I had buyers that bought a house, and a year later they relocated. They had to sell, and they made $30,000, and they didn't do a thing to it. So I think the biggest shift we're going to see is when the foreclosures are allowed to happen.
Yeah.
I think that's going to change things for the investors, for the agents, and for the cost of those flipped homes. But
Yeah.
I honestly think when you're talking about, think about when all of those people that are still in forbearance and they're being allowed to stay in their home, right?
Yep.
When they lose their home, they're going to have 7 years of not being able to purchase a home. The rents in our area in central Pennsylvania are insane already. It's going to drive it up so much. And I mean, I hear this all the time. I have people calling me all the time for rentals. And unfortunately, there's really nothing to send them.
Yep.
And I think it's going to make these, investors are going to look at it in a different way. Yeah, they want to flip, but they just really want to hold more because of what they can get for rentals.
Right. And I think that's what Wall Street's seeing too. And, and maybe not even just Wall Street. There's a lot of smaller private equity places with $10 or $20 million worth of real estate that like in the right market, that's a lot.
That is.
I was really amazed at the rental rates in Central PA. I mean, for the cost of homes. So I'm coming from a Philly market, and you're from Bucks County. I lived in Montgomery County.
I mean, the Philly market.
Yeah, the Philly market is much closer to that 1%, rent multiplier. Whereas you come out here and, if you're paying retail, you're probably at 1%. But if you're getting a discount, now all of a sudden you're talking 1.5% or 2% in a solid B class neighborhood. Like that's really hard to get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I do agree when you were mentioning JP Morgan buying, I do think I heard that. I mean, you hear that. I don't see it a lot yet in this market. But I hear of that. I hear that there are large, even brokerages, real estate brokerages that have big investment firms that have saved millions and millions of dollars because they're anticipating a crash.
Yep.
And yes, that would change everything because they would start monopolizing the market. And then they're going to be able to dictate. And there's a little bit, I think that's a little scary to think about that.
And I think that as long as the economy stays fairly stable, and that's a big question at this point, right? But as long as it stays fairly stable and we still have an imbalance of open jobs versus employees that want to work in them, I think that we're going to be in a situation where, especially here in Central PA, like blue collar jobs here are super stable. And, even during COVID, where everybody else kind of, all these layoffs were happening. Yeah, there were layoffs here, but it was a much smaller percentage of the population that were affected.
Yeah. And I think the proof is in the real estate market now, because if everybody from 2 years ago would have been so greatly devastated from COVID, you wouldn't have people being able to purchase homes with cash or even the number of people that want homes. But I think in this area, here's the thing though, there's a lot of relocation since COVID. So I see a lot of out-of-state buyers from New York, New Jersey, coming to this area because they weren't okay with what was happening with COVID, the shutdowns, the freedoms that they lost during that time frame. So I think they moved here because they feel like they'll be able to preserve some of those freedoms. And the cost of housing for a while was a lot lower than big cities like Philadelphia. I mean, we're still lower. I mean, it's still significantly lower when you're looking at home sales.
Yes.
But I'm telling you, we're creeping up there. If I have a buyer that's pre-approved up to 250, I don't even want to set their auto email for 250 because if they can afford 250 and that's their max, they really shouldn't be looking at houses more than 200,000.
Right. Because they're going to be bid up.
In all reality, it's going to go more than likely 25 to 50,000 over asking.
Yeah. Isn't that a shame? I mean, it really is. It
And
really
not for
is.
the sellers, but for the buyers. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but
Like what? Like the sellers, it used to be that they were worried about it appraising. Like everybody's waiving appraisal, that they have enough money in their bank accounts because they know they're not going to be the offer chosen. And that's
right,
when I, as their agent, have to be really honest with them. I have honest conversations with my buyers all the time because I want them to be informed and have the same information and knowledge that I would have. So I say,
right.
listen, if you're going to overpay for a house in this type of market, you have to sell in a like market to get that same equity out of it. Or if you need to move, then you need to hold on to it and rent it out.
Yeah.
Or you're going to lose money.
Well, and what's wild. Well, exactly. You're going to lose money. You're going to have to downgrade homes, and that's the biggest problem people have, right? Is that they're coming out. They might make a good chunk of change on the sale, but the money's got to go somewhere. I mean, like they got to move into something. So
you have to find something. Yes,
right,
exactly. Yeah.
right,
I
yeah,
think that the part that is hard to watch, I think, is even though the prices were inflated before, the low interest rate balanced it out. So
right.
I had an investor and we were looking at this townhome in Heatherfield. And he paid 130 for it 6 years ago. The interest rate was like 6% or something, whatever. And his monthly payment was going to be $150 a month less, paying $35,000 more in sales price with a 3.5% interest rate. You know what I mean? And so it was still a win at that point.
Right.
It's now becoming, it's not a win anymore,
So you touched on interest rates. Over the last week, the interest rates have gone up 15 basis points for a 30-year fixed. It's only about 9 for a 15-year fixed. Where do you think this stops? Because I think that my estimate before all these interest rate hikes started happening was somewhere about 6.5%. It really starts affecting the market. Now, again, we're going to have shortages in housing. We're going to have competition from cash buyers and all that kind of stuff. But I think at some point it becomes unaffordable. What do you think that maybe not that number is, but where do you think that the interest rate hikes stop? What? Yeah.
You mean like what number do I think it's going to stop at, or when do you think it'll really start affecting?
Let's do both. Let's
Okay.
start with where it'll start affecting, I think.
Yeah. You said 6.5. I was thinking 7 or 8. That actually was the interest rate when we first bought bought our first house. It was 7.75%.
Yep.
And you know what? But the price of like that same house that we bought it for, what was it, like 125, 135. You'd be able to sell it for 300,000 right now.
Yeah.
So
right.
That's the difference. That's the problem. Obviously, people are making more money now than they were 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm telling you, just because of the supply and demand, it is going to affect how much of a house they can afford or if they can purchase. And why I say that is because we used to look at first-time homebuyers. You used to say, okay, they were in the 125 to 175 range, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is out there for $125,000?
Not something you want to live in. Not in a neighborhood you want to live in. Right.
There's pretty much nothing. Like even a townhome, it's really hard to find for $150,000.
Right.
So yeah, I think I think the demand for housing still is going to continue being so great that it's going to temper the high interest rates. And I think, there are going to be obviously people who are not going to be able to purchase because they're not going to be able to find anything in their price point, not because they can't get pre-approved, but because
there's nothing there.
The competition's so tough. Yeah.
So what do you think about government intervention with this? Because I've seen a couple stories about local municipalities saying, look, you're not allowed to buy this as an investment property. At this point in the market, we're going to limit the number of investment properties that somebody can buy in this, in this township or something like that. But
yeah,
I get
that. I don't believe they should be. I feel like anytime that we allow the government to take away something that was a freedom, we are freely, like capitalism is being able to purchase and sell as we want to, right? And we already have to deal with taxes and certain things that we can't get away from. I can see them limiting purpose. like zoning.
Yeah.
You moving into a residential area and starting a business that makes a lot of noise and doesn't look nice to your neighbors, that's one thing. But an investor just being able to purchase it and flip it and make money, I mean, that's the idea of the United States of America.
I'm not necessarily talking about flips. So I'm more so thinking about rentals. I mean, we also already have some restrictions that you can see on like Airbnb rentals and that sort of thing. I could see a situation where, areas would be required to be owner occupied or something like that, just to make sure that there is affordable housing for homeowners, and you know what I mean?
I know what you're saying. I see that in HOAs a lot. I haven't seen it anywhere else yet. I see that with HOAs. I think that's really important for us as agents. Like, we have to disclose that if we're the listing agent. We have to be proactive about that as the buyer's agent, making sure we know our ratios and making sure that this, if our investor's going in and they want to rent it out and then we close and they find out, oh, by the way, that one closed the day before you and that was the last one allowed to be rented out.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, great. So yeah, I think you have to be really proactive and be in touch with that HOA person to make sure that your investor's getting what they're purchasing.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, Tonya, we're past a half hour. You promised me a half hour. I appreciate it. I know you're traveling today, so I'm not going to hold you up. But if somebody wants to call you either to find them an investment property or to sell their property, or if they're looking for their first home or their next home, how would they contact you?
My cell number, that's the quickest and easiest way to reach me, is texting or calling me 717-608-2426.
Awesome. All right, great. I mean, look, you are a rock star agent, and we really appreciate having you on the show. If you're out there and you're looking for a hard money loan, you're looking to fund your next investment project, give me a call. Even though rates are going up everywhere else, ours have not changed. You can underwrite your deal in a couple hours, get you approved, and we can close in as soon as 24 hours if your title work's done.
Awesome.
So, yeah. So we'll be
questions about that. I'll hit you up for that later.
That's perfect. I love it.
Awesome.
Awesome. So look, guys, thanks so much for joining us today. We'll be back here sometime next week, and feel free to reach out to Tonya or myself if we can help. Until then, go out, make some money, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thanks Josh. See ya.
Don't leave. All right. Bye.
Okay.